Well, let's shift our focus to some health matters. To anyone that has ever had to have their loved ones going through an operation and being placed under ICU, they're forced to bring their loved ones food, especially in public hospitals. So we're going to be speaking to Omy Naidoo, who is a dietitian and the founder at Newtricion Dietitians, to tell us about the type of diet people who just came out of the ICU, in fact, should be eating. Omy, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
It's a very good afternoon to you and your viewers, and thanks for having me on the show.
Omy, at this point, given the spotlight that's being shone in terms of food and nutrition for those coming out of ICU, what does that diet look like for patients, perhaps to fast-track their healing?
So essentially, we've got to understand that critical illness is what we call catabolic, meaning that it increases the body's requirements of protein, energy, and lots of vitamins and minerals. So on one end, your critical illness increases your requirements, but those patients or those loved ones that are in ICU, often they can't be fed enough because they have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, as well as various feeding issues. So the net effect is that when a patient comes out of ICU, they've lost a lot of muscle. So if your loved one has come out of ICU, they definitely need a lot of protein, so lots of eggs, meat, dairy products. We need to look at probably starting some nutritional supplements in these patients. But very often it's the key to understand that patients in the ICU globally are what we call underfed. And that is where dietitians come in to create this awareness in terms of better nutrition to that ICU patient.
Well, thank you for that, Omy, because at this point, for those who don't understand the role of a dietitian, I wanted to perhaps look at how you would describe the role of the dietitian rather, in the ICU's multidisciplinary team, and how your assessments and interventions contribute to the patient's care. I mean, it's not a blanket approach.
Absolutely. I think, the age-old sort of stereotype that a dietitian can help with weight loss is something that's being challenged on a daily basis by clinical dietitians like myself. Yes, we can help with weight loss, but nutrition goes so much more. In the ICU, the critical care dietitian on a daily basis calculates and prescribes the nutrients that's needed for those loved ones in the ICU. The evidence is very clear. Providing good nutrition reduces the chances of infection. It reduces the number of days on a ventilator. It increases or it can help you reduce the length of hospital stay, and ultimately helps to reduce the chance of death, or what we call in the medical terms mortality rate. So I'll just rephrase that. What's fed to our loved ones in the ICU setting plays a key role in terms of his or her recovery. Knowing that if you've got a loved one in the ICU, discuss with the treating practitioners as to whether there's a dietitian involved, and how do you get one involved? Because you need somebody managing what he or she is taking in. Just one thing with the ICU patient, very often they are ventilated and sedated. So there are many other emergent medical issues that are being treated, and sometimes nutrition falls on the bottom half of that radar. Essentially what happens is that these patients get out of the ICU having lost a lot of muscle, and this then affects what we call the functional recovery. In the ICU setting, we ask, or there's a famous quote that goes on in that, are we creating victims or survivors?
Omy, thank you for that. And I wonder, as we look at the nutritional approach and how it differs for non-sedated ICU patients who may have challenges with oral intake due to factors like nausea, vomiting, and even a change in their taste buds.
Yes, so with these patients, we would modify the type of diet we're giving them. So often we may use something called a light diet. These are things that are not fatty, not too spicy, and not highly seasoned. That's going to trigger more nausea and vomiting. And for a lot of these patients, we end up prescribing what's called oral nutritional supplements. These are 200 to 250 ml preparations that are medically developed, lots of protein, lots of vitamins and minerals. And these are prescribed and fed to these patients. So there's two different types of patients that are in the ICU, one the ventilated, and then the ones that you're mentioning now that are off the ventilator and eating orally, but both have an urgent issue to meet their nutrient requirements.
The issue of affordability also comes into play, given South Africa's unique social economic dynamics. How does that impact the role of a dietitian and the recovery, given what you've alluded to?
So, with dietitians, what we do is essentially we work on many, many factors for the patient, their medical status, their lifestyle, their work schedule. But more and more in South Africa's economy, we as dietitians are also taking into consideration budget. So the message to the public is that there's an abundance of good dietitians in the public sector as well as in the private sector. So rather reach out to a dietitian who can form that individualized plan for you or your loved one's recovery.
And then just lastly, are there concerns about South Africa in relation to our staple foods and how this impacts lifestyle, eating and nutrition in our overall health as a population? What concerns are emerging there as we conclude?
So the biggest concerns is definitely the obesity rates. And with that obesity rate, we know that South Africa comes up very high in terms of one of the largest obesity rates in the world. But with that comes a lot of what we call non-communicable disease, such as diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. So that's a growing pattern. But even more scary is that a recent study done showed that even our youth or our kids are what we consider overweight or obese, showing that they're growing at larger rates versus other kids on the African continent. And this is telling us that we're missing a lot of disease prevention by not acting early enough.
All right, Omy Naidoo, thank you for your time with us here on the SABC, for weighing in on that. Of course, we're just shining a spotlight on nutrition and the importance of that support after critical illness. Again, thanks to Omy for his time with us here on the SABC and for helping us with that empowering information. So that conversation is where we'll leave it for now.